Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Lambert Mbom. Welcome to the Lambom Show. Today is Saturday, August 27th, and we are on the African Soccer Vibes with two veteran journalists. Today is very special. We have two very senior journalists with us. It's very rare to have that, and I'm very grateful. I have with us senior journalist Njomo Kevin. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bone.
And of course, the man himself, Mr. Fon.
Yes, sir. I'm glad.
Last
I'm glad to be talking. I'm glad to be talking with Mr. Njomo Kevin, with whom I spent some time on internship at the radio house. We've had some few exchanges on telephone. Today I can talk with him. I have an exchange with him right over there. I guess it should be in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. I think that should be it. So I'm glad we are there, and we're going to talk business.
So thank you both. And in fact, Mr. Kevin is actually here in Maryland. We came. We met over 2 days ago. But
All right.
you two are the professionals, isn't it? We want to learn from the pros. So last week I was made to promise that we were going to start the show on time. Again, this week we seem to be starting in time. I'm going to I'm going to make the pledge that we're going to start on time next week. Absolutely. And I think what needs to happen then is that once you are ready, Fon, you just go ahead and then I'll join in so that we don't keep people waiting. Now I'll show you how. Okay.
What are you suggesting that I have to start presenting the program? Ahmed,
So-
you are a very skillful man. You took all the time to be able to beat people to the game. Beating people at the game to have me on the show. Now you're taking the other way around again. You're always very crafty in the way you go about things, right?
I learned from the best.
All right. Well, if you say so.
Okay, so while we are on today, let's get into some. Where do we start?
Where the chief presenter is going to start. We're going to be ready.
Okay,
Yeah, you
so
talked about the preparations for the World Cup, and you also talked about having to peep into the Czech's diary. We're ready for all of that, I guess so.
right. So let's start off from the general perspective in terms of where the continent is, the five teams that are preparing for the World Cup. Any news on that front, and then we'll come over to Mr. Kevin to give us his own assessment of where the teams are, especially his favorite team, the Indomitable Lions of Cameroon.
All right. Well, you asked me to find out, to nose around to find out how far the preparations are going on. And for now, I would say that the preparations are around the corner. They are still going, they are around the corner. And all we know is the program of work for the various teams during the next FIFA window. And for the country, you say that it is Jomo Kevin's choice team, the Indomitable Lions of Cameroon. They are scheduled to take on Uzbekistan and on South Korea. That will be their two test games before or during the FIFA window. And the question they're asking us is, why would they be choosing Uzbekistan and South Korea? It would appear that South Korea invited the Cameroon to play a friendly with them in South Korea, and they were supposed to play also against Ecuador, but Uzbekistan was invited to play alongside South Korea, who are preparing for the World Cup, and Ecuador decided to accept an invitation by Cameroon to play. So Cameroon were playing against South Korea and also against Uzbekistan. And the question we're asking ourselves is, what has guided the choice for Cameroon to play against South Korea in the warm-up to the World Cup finals? Well, one can filter out of the FECAFOOT bureau and the bench is that they were invited, and that was the only chance they had remaining because every other team, what they saw, had already booked their places for friendly matches before it got known to us this way that it was already time for that to be done. I don't know exactly what that kind of stuff should mean, but that is exactly what we're being told. And so Cameroon will be taking on South Korea. Cameroon has played against South Korea before 5 times in 5 international friendlies. I think the first one was way back in 1984. And on that occasion, Cameroon was bashed by 5-0 by South Korea. After that, Cameroon managed a draw. That was in 1994, and then 1995, another draw. And then South Korea came up again to defeat Cameroon 2-1 in the 4th international friendly. And the last one was just a draw. So far, Cameroon has never been able to defeat South Korea in a game of football. So probably they are trying to say that it is possible to break that jinx. And if they do break the jinx during the friendly with South Korea, then we're definitely going to provide something like a perfect launch pad, psychologically speaking, ahead of the World Cup finals. That has to do with Cameroon. And then against Senegal, Senegal is going to be between for Cameroon's friendly matches against South Korea and Uzbekistan, the question they are going to be asking is, why would they be playing against Uzbekistan and South Korea, whereas the World Cup opponents are in the likes of Brazil, Switzerland, and Serbia? No such thing like having any kind of similarity in the game plan and so on and so forth. I'll make a comment about that when I've looked at the program schedule for the other 4 teams. Then in Group A, where Senegal is supposed to take on the Netherlands, Qatar, and Ecuador, they are going to be playing a test match against Bolivia. Of course, Bolivia and Ecuador are like brothers in arms, and they play virtually the same kind of football. So that should be understood why Senegal thinks it's worth taking that chance to play against Ecuador, and so try to have the first-hand experience of what the South African football is all about, at least for now. So that is supposed to be taken as a wise choice made by the Senegalese side. Then Ghana, who are playing in the World Cup finals alongside Portugal, South Korea, and Uruguay, have as sparring partners during the FIFA window, Brazil, Nicaragua, and Switzerland. So one of the opponents is going to be Uruguay. So what do they say? Let's look for a team that plays the same kind of football as Uruguay and try to slug it out with them before the World Cup final. So they settled for the choice of Nicaragua. And of course, Brazil, because both of them are down in Latin America. The only other team they're going to play against that has nothing to do with football made in that region of the world is going to be Switzerland. Morocco are scheduled to play against Croatia, Belgium, and Canada. They have chosen for their sparring partners during the FIFA window, Chile and Paraguay. And so I imagine that if they do that, they know what they're looking at or what they're looking for. Whereas football made in Croatia, Belgium, or Canada has nothing whatsoever in terms of similarity with what is being practiced in Chile and Paraguay. They are settling for that because they say that they are what is trying to stop.
My sound has been cut off. I'm not following.
So, yes, sir. Kevin, what did you just say? I can get you. Okay, I continue. Then there's Tunisia, who will play alongside Denmark, Australia, and France. They have chosen as a sparring partner Brazil. Brazil has a football that does not resemble what is practiced in or being played in Denmark, Australia, and France. And then, so that would be the program schedule for the 5 African flag bearers at the World Cup finals. Now, Lambert and Kevin, there is something I stand by. As far as I'm concerned, I think when you're going for something as important as the World Cup finals, what you do is you select the team that has something to offer in the game of football. Don't say we are going to go and play against, for example, take the case of, let's say, Ghana. Ghana say they are playing against Portugal, South Korea, and Uruguay. So they want to have as sparring partners Brazil and Nicaragua and Switzerland. Now the question is Ghana going to the World Cup to play only the first round and come back? Or they are going to go and go beyond the first round? Because after you have already located those who play the same kind of football as you in the first round, what happens in the second round? So as far as I'm concerned, if you are looking for sparring partners to go and stock out or compare skills with before the World Cup finals, look for those teams that have better placing than you on the ranks, the FIFA ranks. That will make some sense to me. Because whatever thing happens, if you have to go and play and win the World Cup, you are going to play 7 matches, at least, or 7 matches, let's say. Now, how do you know which team you're going to play in the quarterfinals, which team you're going to play in the semifinals? So the idea, as far as I'm concerned, of selecting sparring partners, being teams that come from the zones of teams that you're meeting at the World Cup finals, to me, constitutes more of a negation to what you're opting for in terms of argument.
Thank you very much. That's a great analysis. I have a problem with Cameroon, but senior journalist, Mr. Kevin. So let's hear your own analysis as to, again, let's start off first, because the audience this is your first time on our show. We are very grateful, very much obliged. Maybe give us something about your career history, how you came into journalism before we get into the sports thing. I know soccer or football is your thing, is in your blood, but let's hear how you started off in journalism, because it's kind of surprising that Fon said he interned under you. That's kind of strange. I didn't think that you were that young. Mr. Kevin, can you hear us?
I think you have some problem with audio, because he remarks when I was still talking that there was difficulty to get me. He's still saying hello, so I guess he's not yet on.
Can you hear us, Mr. Kevin? Kevin, can you hear us?
I see him frozen there, Lambert. Maybe we'll come back to him when he's on.
Okay.
Yeah, Lambert.
So again, Fon, while we're waiting for Kevin to fix up his stuff, again, I don't see any particular seriousness with the preparations by any of those teams. I mean, what is the use playing a team like, is it Uzbekistan? What's the name even? I mean, how do you go to prepare for a World Cup and you're playing against people who are not known in soccer world?
Well, you remember before the Women's Africa Cup of Nations, Cameroon went and played against France. The idea was to see what they could perform, how they could perform against France. They saw what happened. They went there and they were bashed by France. So sometimes some of these coaches say that, well, we're going to the World Cup finals. We should avoid the situation where we leave and go to the finals with a string of defeats. So I could imagine that they want to play against a side that plays football. That's to be understood. But the question is, what type of style? Well, if you play and win, that helps you psychologically. But if you play and you lose, it dents your morale psychologically. So I think that at the end of the day, they say that they're trying to size up teams that could provide the required opposition that could help them maybe improve on their preparations proper. So I would not really say that there is anything. In fact, that football has become an entirely global affair, and this issue or notion of senior staffship or senior bosses in football has certainly become antiquated. So I imagine that if they are looking for those opponents, they are probably looking just for opponents who play the game of football and who can put up some amount of opposition. That is what it is. They don't give a lot of emphasis. They don't lay emphasis. You want to know whether the tactics that you are taking to the World Cup final can actually play out well. That's what you want to see. The idea is not for you to go and amass a number of victories in test matches and get yourself maybe drowned in confidence over those before you go back to the final. So it's just a question of trying to practice those tactics, trying to see whether these tactics can really hold sway when we go to play the real thing. That's what I think.
Mr. Kevin, can you hear us? Kevin, can you hear us? It's surprising that
he's... the problem with sound. I'm not hearing you.
Oh.
I'm not hearing you.
Okay. See, can you hear me now?
I don't think he can hear you. Not until he has worked on the connections that give him the sound. Otherwise, it won't be possible. Not until that is done, I'm afraid.
So while we're working on the sound thing, let's transition to maybe talk
maybe,
about...
Maybe you send, maybe, Lambert, maybe you send him a written message.
For text him. I don't know how to enter this thing.
Yeah, now I think he has some difficulty having his connection to sound fixed, but he will get into that, I imagine. So what you probably should have done is just send him a text message, and then he will be able to reply to that, and maybe try to make the observation and make suggestions on what he needs to do to have that little problem fixed.
So, Fon, what would be your best? I mean, I see the Cameroon national team is currently, I think they are preparing for a test game one of these days. I don't know. There was a list that was published recently about players. Again, in your build up to the World Cup, who are the people you are targeting? Which players are you really looking forward to? I mean, with the Cameroon national team.
Now, you see, Cameroon has some players whom the fans want to call as 5-star players. You have the Zamboanguisas, and you have the young man who delivered Cameroon from bondage in the battle for Blida, and you have the goalkeeping. They count so much on us to provide the steering hindrance and prevent Cameroon from taking the goal. Yeah, he's asking me the question. Let's say the young man, somebody yesterday next to me asking the young man, what's this Candy? So those are the key players who want to reign supreme. They want to maintain the stranglehold on their domination of the team. Of course, a player like Choupo-Moting, of course, newcomers like Njomo. So all of them, in fact, at this stage of preparation, so at this stage of the finals, each and every player knows that he has the honors out there for the grabs. So each want to be at his best. So I will think that it will be unfair to want to imagine that as of now, that you can be calling some players 5-star players, 1-star player, and so on and so forth. So all of them who have been called up to camp are going to, let's say, give themselves what I can call a spiritual rebirth in the game of football as they look forward to the major challenge of the World Cup finals. So they themselves are going to do their homework, and as soon as that camp begins, they know the countdown is on to be chosen or drop out of the list. Of course, you remember that the president of the Cameroon Football Federation, Samuel Eto'o, and his coach, Rigobert Song, had said that no player had as yet qualified to play or to sport the Lions jersey at the World Cup finals. So for now, I think it will be unfair for us to start assuming. But those who have been there before, what you can call in quotes the big boys who have been there before, they definitely want to live true to expectation or live true to their billings. But this is the time, mark you, because history has proven that during this period, you have what they call revelations. So it will be unfair now to start saying that this or that player. But of course, the Tuke Kambis, the Zamboanguisas are definitely eyeing that their commanding position of being the déjà vu and the déjà confirmé. But it's not going to be like that. It is the World Cup finals, what they call the players' dreamland. They are going to the finals, and they will not sit back and say, because this player has these achievements or these accolades, let's just let them go. No, they're not going to give that. We will try to give each and every potential bidder for a place in the finals a run for their self-esteem. So for now, we're going to I think we'll bring ourselves some justice by just allowing things be, and maybe taking down our pens and papers and trying to jot down, as they say, the camp for the World Cup has started, and let's see who can deliver and who will not be able to deliver.
If you are just joining us, you're on the Lambom Show, and I'm on set with veteran sports journalist Fon Echekiye. We are having problems with connections with Njomo Kevin, who is right here in Maryland. But while we sort that out, since you talked about the president of FECAFOOT, let's stay with FECAFOOT. So seemingly, he had call it an overdose of I don't know what to say about courageous. Well, FIFA just gave him. Is it FIFA? No, the arbitration council
The
gave him.
CAS, the court of arbitration for sports, CAS.
So they just gave him a kind of. I think he's breathing well now because seemingly the case that had been there for a while, they ruled in favor of Eto'o. So what is the situation with that case and what are the prospects? Because it seems as if Abdurrahman is vowing to go back to appeal that.
Yeah, the way I've introduced it, Lambert, that shows some professionalism on your part. Most of the media outlets in Cameroon and even on social media, they just say Eto'o faces legitimacy as the president of FECAFOOT has been confirmed. They stop at that. You have said Eto'o faces legitimacy has been confirmed, but Abdurrahman vows for appeal. You say that way, people know that there is something. So that's why we can only say for now that Eto'o is breathing better. We cannot say he's breathing well because he knows the capabilities of Abdurrahman Baba. Abdurrahman says that CAS, as he had predicted, quoting from the records, as he had predicted, that CAS has once more demonstrated that a corrupt body confirmed that Eto'o is the president of FECAFOOT, and in other words, saying that his election was free and fair. Now, it's important that if I just hope that Njomo will come on at some point because there is a part of this story that involves him when he was working with Metro Happy at the Federation. Now, so what happened is that Abdurrahman said this, Eto'o, to start with Eto'o, the victor for now is Eto'o. Now, this sledgehammer had been on top of his head since May. And then CAS postponed the verdict for June, postponed again for July. And when July came, they say end of August. We have a few days to the end of August, they have come out with the verdict. Now, the first observation is that you might not really, CAS can sometimes be very unpredictable. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing is they are saying that with other litigations were there at the table, for two key files that were remaining on the table, that Eto'o faces elections in December were or was legitimate. Now, this is what has been going on. Those two cases pending at the Court of Arbitration for Sports, we're looking at one, that the legitimate General Assembly of FECAFOOT that had to elect the president of that body was the 2009 General Assembly. So CAS said, well, 2009 General Assembly is outmoded, is outdated. What an argument. That we cannot keep on going back and bringing back to life fossils. And that is my own language now. Now, but that the law doesn't talk about fossils or not, because when the law is there, take your constitution in the United States of America, you have stayed there for donkey years and nobody has touched anything on it. Because they know that the law stays. So whether you're a fossil or a newborn, the law is going to stay. Now, so what is happening is they are those who are challenging what CAS has said are saying that one, the General Assembly of 2009 was supposed to have been the legitimate one. And then secondly, being the legitimate one, who were those who were supposed to have voted in the law, the text and bylaws of the Federation. So that's what they were trying to challenge. Now, what has happened is CAS has said that no, 2009, go to the garage. Those who work in 2021 to come out 2018 first to come out with the status of FECAFOOT, those are the ones who were supposed to have done it, and that those status remains the legitimate status for the Federation. So what Abdurrahman is saying is that that is going contrary to the spirit of the Federation's laws and is going contrary to what they call legitimacy in the Federation. So and that is why he has decided to appeal this CAS ruling to the Swiss Supreme Court. Now, what is likely going to happen is that, in fact, what is going to happen is that the Swiss Supreme Court is going to look at the facts of the matter and then take a decision. And what Abdurrahman and co are saying is that if the Supreme Court in Switzerland decides to validate what the latest CAS decision is saying, then they are going to say, okay, hands off that and let them proceed. But they're arguing that it is not possible for that to happen simply because the role of the Supreme Court of Swiss is that have the rules been applied? Has the law been respected? That is what they're looking at. If it's not been respected, he's going to ask them to come back to it. But this time, they are going to take off the lone judge who takes the decision on whether a case is valid or not. So they are banking so much on what is going to happen at the Supreme Court in Switzerland as they look forward to the days ahead.
That's very interesting. Uncle Kevin, can you hear us? Unfortunately, I think he's still having a problem with his connection. So FECAFOOT has been meeting, and one of the things I saw this week they also did was they appointed a pressman. I don't know what is going on. This is the first time, if I'm not mistaken. I've always had a journalist who is there, but what is the difference between having the communications director at FECAFOOT and a pressman for the national team? Is that something new, or that's always been the case?
No, that is what it is. You know, these federations, various national federations, they simply apply the rules and regulations as dictated to them by FIFA. FIFA says that every national team is supposed to have what they call the team press officer. In fact, the appellation team press officer is not outmoded. We call it now media officer, the media officer of the team. So the communications director at FECAFOOT is one thing, and the media officer of the national team is another. So before today, the media officer of the national team was a retired TRTV journalist, Serge before. Now he's been replaced in those functions by Thierry Ndo. Thierry Ndo is coming from what you can call, in quotes, private press. But that doesn't stop him from being a Cameroonian, neither does it stop him from aspiring for that job. So it is FECAFOOT that has decided that they want the team press officer this time to come from there. Same too with the national intermediate team. The team press officer before then, I was told, was Derek Baker, who comes from Ramenda, who was replaced by Francis Bonga. So those some of the decisions taken by the president of the Cameroon Football Federation, of course, after consulting with the executive bureau. But now that is already outdated news. The latest news coming from the federation is that they just had the ordinary general assembly of the federation. Now, first decision, they have decided to dissolve the Cameroon Professional League. You know, there was a lot of noise at some point. They didn't quite agree on whether that league had a legitimacy or not when they had the in-house fighting between those who manage the leagues and those who were part of the Cameroon Football Transitional Council and so on and so forth. But now, with the blessings given to them by CAS the other day, confirming their legitimacy, they have gone ahead to say, okay, now what we could not do then, we are now doing it, and even telling whoever wants to hear that these are our decisions. That's the first one. The second one is one of those who were firmly against Samuel Eto'o's legitimacy as the president of the Cameroon Football Federation, FECAFOOT, Gibai Gatama, has been sacked. He has been removed from the General Assembly of the Cameroon Football Federation. So he is no longer a legitimate delegate. So what do you call that? Do you call that settling scores? Or you call that the penalty for their standing up to us, and so on and so forth? Well, I can't say which of them is it, but I just don't want to imagine that it is a matter of settling scores, because something you have to understand is you may not like the face of Lambom, but if Lambom is a good professional and he does his job well, then take that aspect of him and exploit it, and then forget about how his face looks. So I don't understand that because somebody whom we have seen in social media advance very, very logical, very scientific arguments on how football should manage in this country, should just be given a kick and sent out of the General Assembly just because he stood up to the federation boss and the federation's the running executive. We have to be very clear about some of those things, because if you start by settling scores, if that is the case, then you should be very sure that sometime later in future, that is going to come back to haunt you. So for now, Gibai Gatama, who is in the camp of Abdurrahman and the 16 others who are still aspiring, who are still saying they are going to go back to the Supreme Court of Switzerland next week, is already paying the price for being so vocal and standing against what maybe Ethiopia's and his executive bureau stands for.
One of the other things that came out, and again, I don't know the details of these things, you should, but I'm looking at one of the resolutions was to open discussions with Manga Ongene, the technical director of the national team, with respect to a certain litigation he had against FECAFOOT. I'm kind of stunned that Manga Ongene would have litigation against FECAFOOT. Do you have details of that?
I don't quite have that one. But what I can tell you is that it is not new, because there are some of those former national team players who also had ashes to grind with FECAFOOT. Some of them decided to receive money. For example, Magwan Kesak, he decided to bury the hatchet when I was told he was caught up and given some amount of money a year, 40 million CFA francs. So I'm told. I've not tried to investigate to find out whether it was true or not. But it is known that he decided to bury the hatchet with the federation. There was also Jules Denis Onana, who too was gone in for the top job at FECAFOOT, who decided to call it quits with the trouble he had with the federation. So there are some players, in fact, there are players there in that team who used to play for the national team, who had certain things to iron out with the federation. Well, but it's not because you play in the national team that if you have anything to settle, it's called to settle with the federation, that you won't do that. If Manga Ogene happens to be one of those who had something, an issue with the federation, then definitely he has to push his point right across and make sure that he gets what he wants from the federation. Because in the eyes of many analysts today, it would appear that most of the guys who are eyeing the federation, who have business or have issues to settle with the federation, are doing so because they have not had their own share of that national football cake they were hoping to have. So they say, now if that's the case, okay, now we can't lose on both fronts. Let's try to get now at the level of our private matters with them. Let them pay us for this or that kind of ill that has cost us, something like that.
Well, again, FECAFOOT has too many problems, and I hope as Eto is cleaning up the house, he's cleaning up and preparing the organization for brighter days. I'm wondering whether Uncle Kevin, Njomo Kevin, can you hear us? Still having technical problems, I guess. But Fon, is there anything that from your diary? Let's start off from last week. We all
want us to go to the diary? Well, you know, you insist on the issue of the diary. Yes, you can go to the diary. And I think I have something quite interesting for you. Because when you say the diary, those who are listening to that for the first time or hearing that for the first time might get confused. I've written a book about my own professional career that spans 3 decades. And that book, everything being equal, is going to be launched on the 30th of this month. That is, or the 30th of September. So that will be something like 30 days plus 2, the end of this month. So on the 30th of September 2022, the book will be launched in Yaoundé, and the next day, the 1st of October, it will be launched in Douala. Now, it is a compendium.
Just before you go on, Uncle Kevin, can you hear us now?
I am hearing you. I've been hearing you. I'm following you.
Oh, good. Now we can get you.
Fon is just whetting appetite, dragging my tongue. Sometimes tears it into pieces. Sometimes stitches them up, and it only keeps me very excited.
So while we have you now, we had asked the question initially for you to give us maybe a snippet of what took you into journalism and how did that go through now that you're retired.
Oh my God. First, the coincidence, I want to thank God that this triangle went through Bishop Rogan. The three of us share a common background that we all went through Bishop Rogan. And I thank God. Fon, I discovered him just about 2 days ago. So, and I was very excited about it. So in 1965, when I went to Sase College, there was this tradition of clubs, and there was Epiengome Victor, who was a Form 3 student at the time, and Zachary of late, Form 4 at the time. So they were bringing us very close to them. And let me tell you the most wonderful coincidence that they were bringing us together. When I talk of us, from one student who had talents in the direction they wanted. And if your camera was wide open, you will see somebody passing behind me. That is Asongnefak Kemleke, who was also one of those. And we were about 7 of us that Linus Asong, Zachary Ko, and Epiangome took interest in. First of all, Asongnefak had this responsibility because we had a radio in the common room, and he would listen to BBC in the morning. And of course, I bet you through him, many people in Sase College knew what was happening in the outside world. And that was in football. And so it went from there. I continued. Whenever the college team was going out to play matches, I would go and, come back to school and put up reports about that. And it just flowed until university and after, It was also flowing smoothly because there was entertainment and there is entertainment in my blood. And since sports is a very entertaining area. So it flowed until, but my first stint working as a journalist was in Nigeria in the 70s. And from Radio Nigeria, another coincidence I would like to tell you, in the late 70s, Asong Lefak happened to have been station manager of Radio Boya those days. As I said, we've been classmates from 1965 until we all went through university. And then I was working in Radio Calabar, and he was working in Radio Boya as a station manager. And at the time, Radio Calabar, of course, was beaming very well in Cameroon. And most Cameroonians knew that I was working there. I don't want to take a long story. He did what he did. He did some craft work, only for him to let me know that if I were ready to come back home, a job was ready for me. And when I came to Cameroon, he took me to Mr. Kome Epule, who was the regional or the delegate of information and culture in the Southwest. And I bet you, I met papers there already engaging me. They had worked out the papers through Mr. Atu Mofo, who was Secretary General in the Ministry of Information and Culture, through Pa Ebu, and Asom just got information to me that I could come home. I thought I was coming home to talk a few things and go back to Radio Nigeria because I was working with NBC Calabar at the time. I came back home and he took me to Kome Pule. He hid it from me. We went to Kome Pule's office and Kome Pule said, if you are ready to start tomorrow, you can start. So I took a nosedive back to Nigeria because the normal thing there was you either give them a month's notice or you give them a month's salary. So I went back and I was ready to give them a month's salary, and they said for all what I had done, they would let me go. And I came back. Asong had already made a small office for me, where I was, with Vuku Ganincho, who was running programs at the time, and he immediately asked me to start running the sports program the following day. Watongsi was there in the station. John Kwende was there in the station. He called them into his office like the station manager and said, this is an experienced man, give him the leeway. And the following day, I started off with the sports program. And the story just continued developing. Within 3 months, I became the head of programs in the station. And we flowed together until we were separated. I went to Yaoundé and he went to the far north. So that was the story. That was just a tip of the iceberg on how I got into it. It was from Form 1, 1965 in Sase that I started with this trade. So it's been a wonderful experience.
That that is
I don't know how to tell it, but Ford knows a good part of it. And when he started talking about his diary, he's going to launch a book. He knows the travails that we went through to launch one of the books that he wrote on an icon who is gone. So he's whetting my appetite again when he says he's launching a second book. I'll be back in Cameroon by that time, and maybe the people who come to the hall again will see both of us. You know.
It is so wonderful to hear that, because when the first day I asked Fon how he got into it, he's going back to his school days. First in Casbambili, then when he went in Bishop Rogan. So it's amazing how we go to school to study, then end up doing things that we did not study. Because again, for you, it was, you went to Sase, then you had a song Kemneke, and say, bring our regards to him, that we would like to have him to say a word later. But these things, these experiences are what we have carried around, and these, excelled in everything that both of you have been able to accomplish in this. I don't know, do you have, it's a worst question to ask, do you have a best experience to share about your time in journalism?
There are so many, but I would like to share one. I was one of the news editors in NBC Calabar, and of course, one of the main sports reporters for the station. Whenever I did my sports program in Calabar, which I call Sports Roundup, many persons in Nigeria were interested because I always went out to Cameroon to bring information about especially the Premier League. So, but then it was a matter of ethics that if you had to run commentaries for a country, for a nation, you had to even be objective, but objective to a certain, degree. Here I was sports reporter in Benin in 1979. Canon against Bendel Insurance. Here was late Zachary, Abembenge, late Magnibo for the Cameroonian team, for the Cameroonian delegation. And I had to do everything, even if they knew the Cameroonian blood was running in my vein, but I had to do everything physically to disown Cameroon. Here we were in the reporter's booth, and I made every effort to give my reports objectively. Cameroon, Bendel Insurance scored the first goal, Canon equalized. Bendel Insurance scored the second, Canon equalized. And after that, the Canon players went haywire. And the way Emana and Abega were moving, I could no longer hold my vocabulary, but use it for the right people. And Abega got one pass, he took one body swerve, and Francis Ngosu, not Henry Ngosu, Francis Ngosu, who was a defender for Bendel Insurance, fell out of the field. And I described that as a Maasai, movement. He had been thrown out of the field. And that move led to the third goal. And I said, Cameroonians are doing whatever they like with the ball. The technician who was operating the Nagra, my technician, gave me a one good punch, and I bet the blood started oozing out of my mouth. And he asked me, okay, what should they talk like that? Say Cameroon they do with ball now. You know where you did? What should they talk like that? you know? And I was struggling with my handkerchief to hold the blood not spill on my shirt. That was my fate. And that blow, I had to adjust. But while fighting to adjust, the fourth goal came in. That was Kanu. And late Zakarinko and Benge, they could see me, especially Zachary, who was my mentor, could see me suffering in another reporter's booth. But that's one interesting, that made it more bad. Even though they took two teeth off my mouth, I still hold it as a very exciting And I mean, you can imagine my own technician giving me such a hard punch. You know, he regretted while we were in the vehicle going back to Calabar from Benin and wrote a letter of apology. But then I could understand because it was all a matter of emotion. So that's
That
just one I
is
could tell you briefly.
that's the funniest story I've ever heard. And you see, I mean, now that you mention it, because the first two shows that we had, Fon kept talking about Zakarinko. I didn't know that you were a mentee of Zakarinko too, and because Fon too also has some. Do you have any fond memories of Zach, and any experience you want to share about Zach?
There are so many. I followed your show with Fon, and I think I would only encourage viewers to go back to that show because you see, Fon was following it with much more passion at that time than I was. I had gone through his, tutelage in Sussex College. We were not seeing where we would end up with that. It was just a matter of, fulfilling your dreams and enjoying your passion. And when he went to the School of Journalism, I was in the Department of English. You know, that I was reading English at the time did not still make me go too close in terms of one day I'll be in that profession. It was deep down buried in me because quite a good number of the persons of my generation those days, if you look at them, most of them were very good in the English language, and good number of them went through the English department. It was a trend at the time. Call their names, line them up. You will see that they have a background, from the English department. So it was after, when I was in Nigeria and went fully into it because I had the opportunities of continuing with journalism, but not as a sports journalist. So when I came back to Cameroon in 1979-80, and Zachary was still in the game, I said, okay, we've met again. This time, let's make, something big out of it. And I was just about, 7 or 8 months in the radio in Boya. And Zachary put me on my first international assignment. And we broke the jinx that all those who covered international sports, sporting events for radio, for television, had to come only from Yaoundé. I give him credit right in his grave that he broke that jinx. And he used me, used Gregory Allen, used late Peter Afu to break that jinx. And to a further extent, Maurice Timini. So, because I had been known over the waves from Radio Nigeria, and people were following me closely, Zachary used that as an instrument to put a new trend, to set a new pace in Sierra TV. And he sent me out to Angola. And there was no protest, even at the headquarters in Yaoundé. Once he put the name, he gave the name that I was the one going with the team. Honestly, there was no protest. And that gave him now the leeway. Alem, Peter Afu, and so on. Nicodem Tetang, they all went abroad. They all covered matches abroad, from the provinces those days. So I still give him that credit. So from that position, Lambert and Fon, I was like, serving him. I was serving him. I ensured that whenever he was going to the stadium, his equipment were all in order, and so on and so forth. And then come 1989, he was transferred over to television with Abembege, and he came and called for me and said, I am going to television, but you will be with me there, producing the programs. That's how I went until finally he was transferred to Boya in 1989.
So again, it's so great to be amongst great people like you. And since Mr. Fon, you want to give us that the famous lines from Zach that you mastered, because I want to use that as a segue to ask Mr. Kevin the time that you are an intern under him, what he remembers most. But so I want you to repeat the lines from your common mentor. Then I'll transition and ask Mr. Kevin what he thinks about you when you are an intern. I mean, this no assessment because you have retired.
No, there is
Okay.
for myself, and I've had the experiences differently, because when I was in Nigeria, that is when I really went into football commentary full time, officially. And as I was getting into it, there was already an icon in Nigeria and another one in Ghana that I was looking up to, because I could hardly get Radio Cameroon when I was in Nigeria. I could hardly get them. And since I was in the field in Nigeria and I was working for the huge population in Nigeria and beyond, the person I set more attention on was Ernest Okonkwo, who was definitely. And then once in a while, when I listened to Sports Panorama, at that time, I would hear Zakarinko make his references to Ernest Okonkwo. So, and I knew that I was going to go back to Cameroon one day. So I said it was a time to imbibe more of Ernest Okonkwo and Harry Thompson, who was in Ghana at the time. And just to diverge a little, the famous Ekokodem, who, of the Nigerian Biafran Civil War, that I was in a radio station where Okon Atako, who were the two icons of radio at the time in Nigeria, I met them. So in areas of production and programs, I was focusing more on Okon Atako and Ekokondem. And in the area of sports reporting, I was focusing more on Ernest Okonkwo. So when I was coming back from Nigeria, I was coming back now with a different vision about vocabulary, sports reporting, and so on. But that notwithstanding, because I was trying to build my own personality at the time as I came back from Nigeria. But that notwithstanding, you never forget the fingers that fed you. Zachary, I want to tell you, just go back to Sase. He won most of the prizes in their class for English language. Give it to him. He was prolific in that. And that I knew. So I felt that I could still get a lot of vocabulary, in terms of vocabulary from him. And when I was coming in, there was the very famous match, Canon of Yaoundé, A.S. Bilima. And what I wanted to get from Zakarenko very closely was his description of the pitch. That is where I put my focus. His descriptions of the pitch. For on the pitch, I wanted to be as creative as possible, and then use some of the Ernest Okonkwo's. And so off the pitch, one that Zachary startled me with, brief, from Kuseri to Bakingele, Cameroonians uncork your bottles. That has remained evergreen in my mind. Because not only the sports, but knowing the geographical locations of those areas, and knowing at the time that Cameroonians were so devoted to their bottles, especially at a time when they were leading AS Bilima 2-0, and Zachary just said, from Bakingele from Kusiri to Bakingele. I mean, what a connection. Cameroonians in between this mound, under this mound, uncork your bottles. And if Cameroonians had to uncork their bottles, it was to tell you, celebrate.
Victory.
So if like for those of us who went to Sase, Bishop Rogan, and read some literature, once you start getting that kind of a description, the beauty just presents itself in front of you, and it becomes very amazing.
Wow. So I've heard that one from Kuseri to Bakingili. What is your own memory for? At least I've heard it many times.
Come again?
You were asking me to go back.
Oh, okay.
No,
Yes.
you were asking me to go back to that famous report that dragged me to journalism.
Right. That's it.
We are 3 hours away from what has been described as a decisive and important encounter. Decisive because a win for either team today will give them a right to leadership in the Four Nations Group 1, following yesterday's 1-1 tie between Italy and Peru. Decisive also because for Cameroon to make the goals this afternoon, the players must be in superlative form. Offer no scoring opportunities to the post, will have a remarkable flair to capitalize on defense error, and of course, adopt and sustain a very aggressive attacking power and spirit for full 90 minutes. Poland, 4 times World Cup finalists, will want to beat Cameroon, their second all-black World Cup opponents, as they did against Haiti in West Germany 8 years ago. But the question is, where do we draw the line between Cameroon and Haiti and between the years 1974 and 1982? Before this afternoon's talk of all this, how Jean Vexin has put up our national football team. Goalkeeper and captain Thomas Nkono. Defenders from left to right, Kaham Michel, Onana Elundu Eli, Njeya Rene and Bom Ephraim. Halfback Kunde Emmanuel, Abega Chiofir, Mbida Arantes and Aoudou Ibrahim. Center forward, Roger Mille and Geya Jacques. Before the 4:15 p.m. clash, and before they answer the question on whether or not Cameroon will make Omar, the British television sports journalist Jerry Harrison says, and I quote from the records, the match between Cameroon and Poland will be tough and tight. Zakarinko in Spain for Radio Cameroon.
I mean, I feel like this should be on every day. You know, we should repeat these words. That's a soccer.
Well, Lambert, see, I see time fast running out. I don't want us to miss out on history. And because Kevin is there, you know, this very day, 33 years ago, Cameroon had to play against Nigeria for the Group C World Cup qualifier in 1990. At the time, Njomo Kevin was in charge of sports and radio. Herbert had gone to television. I think he was already leaving. He had left. You know, we did because of the story at the time, because of the political matter and those kinds of things. Now that's not issue for now. So before the match between Cameroon and Nigeria at the Amadou Ahidjo Stadium in Yaoundé, I had been on internship for 6 weeks in Canada when we were leaving school. So Cameroon lost to Nigeria at the Adama Singba Stadium in Nigeria, 2-0. So in the return match in Yaoundé, I started looking ahead of that match. So I wrote a pre-match report, kept on editing for 1 week. Then I came back from Canada after our internship. And then when I came to Yaoundé, and I came to the broadcast house, I think that day, Mr. Njomo Kevin had a lot on his head and had a lot in his hands. He had to go to the stadium to run the commentaries of the match. So I went behind him and negotiated with the late Epsingum for a possibility to present my own pre-match report of that match, Cameroon-Nigeria. So since it had to do with the church diary, I've now gone back to the diary, the book that has to come out next year, and then I'm reliving now the same report that was done 33 years ago, and this is how the report went on that occasion. When Tunisian referee Juni Neji hosts that big duel later in the day, the greatest football battle in sub-Saharan Africa in recent times would have been fought. Today's match is the first between both countries at the senior World Cup level since 1968, when in the Christmas month of that year, Nigeria qualified for the next round following an aggregate 4-3 win over Cameroon. But much water has swept over the soccer flower beds of both countries since then, that even forecast prophets hardly know what chapters of the anthology to consult to predict the outcome of today's match. As lots continue being cast in Yaoundé and in Lagos, 3 conspicuous stomachs of both countries in this popular sport aptly size up their football mights. Firstly, the brilliant performances of Nigeria junior teams at the final rounds of the World Cup and Cameroon's 1982 World Cup results, respectively. Secondly, the recurrent pair-ups Cameroon versus Nigeria at the African Nations Cup finals in 1984 and 1988, both closing on Cameroonian triumphs. And thirdly, the record-setting highest scores of 7-0 registered in the African Champion Clubs Cup competition by clubs from both countries, namely Bendel Insurance over Sector Set of Niger Republic on the 2nd of October 1974 and Canon Yaoundé over the Requin Atlantique of Benin Republic on the 22nd of March 1987. Today, therefore, is a day of reckoning, and only 90 minutes of brimstone soccer will determine the rightful football commanders in the Bight of Biafra. And as both countries go in for the priceless showdown of Africa's Group C for Italia 90, suspense and anticipation are rife at best and ordinary at minimum. Although the Super Eagles are said to be in superlative form, with some buoyancy provided for by their 2-0 defeat of the Indomitable Lions during the first leg match in Ibadan, they can hardly ignore the highly unpredictable nature of a game of football, especially one when recalls how they unprecedentedly got caught in a booby trap in Libreville earlier in the ongoing campaign. 6 weeks after the showdown at the Adaban Subas venue of legends in Abidjan, or rather in Ibadan, the Lions have drawn the battle lines a few degrees east on the geographer's globe to pitch tent in Yaoundé, where technocrats Valerie Nepomniachtchi and Jean Manga Ongene are bent on consolidating Cameroon's reputation as the wise men of sub-Saharan football. For that anticipated football blitz, the corollary, following considerations of all sorts, concludes on a triplex. 1, that the Green Eagles qualify after a draw. 2, that the Indomitable Lions sailed through after a victory of even half a goal. And 3, that the Green Eagles qualify after resolving a linear equation and obtaining a simple victory of even half a goal. As the countdown continues to the most crucial 90 minutes in contemporary history of football made in both countries, therefore, it would certainly not be asking too much of today's actors if one were to make recourse to the dictum of the celebrated Roman poet of the 8th century, Quintus Horatius Flaccus, which strongly posits, Dulce et decorum est pro patria muri. It is a sweet and glorious thing to die for one's fatherland. That was done this very day, 33 years ago, when I just left school.
I can clap for you, Fon. You see, Lambert, Zachary, and the others went. They had no regrets because they left some of us behind. If I'm going tomorrow, no regrets, because there is somebody you can count on. You know, if he's talking about 1989, see how I got goose flesh because I suffered some other things in that match in Cameroon versus Nigeria at Damasingwa Stadium in Ibadan with players like Eti Mason, Samson Siasia, you know, Owubukri Richard in the stadium. And because I was dressed in a baggy pair of shorts and Leopold Tamba, who was our producer, was in a baggy set, and we decided to speak some French. They fell on us because after that match, Nigeria had to go to Gabon, while Cameroon had to go to Angola. And they took us for spies from Gabon who had come, you know. And suddenly, as they left us, I started speaking in English, and I was speaking some Yoruba too. I said, look at these guys. I went to school here, one of the best universities, and so on and so forth. A professor of the University of Ibadan called Sam Akpabot, in white trousers and red shirt, known to be a magician, one of the toughest prophets in Nigeria. He moved into the field, knelt down, removed a white handkerchief from his pocket, and started waving it in the air. Nigerians all stood and said, Cameroon will not go anywhere when I don't lose that match. And we lost 2-0. The return leg match he's talking about, I was at that time, one of my classmates, of course, you know him, Eric Chinger, was editor in television. And Eric said, you must follow that match minute by minute. We waited for Nigeria at 7:30 a.m. at the airport, and Nigeria never arrived till 7 p.m. and with a military jet. They were just equalizing what we did because we also took them by surprise. We arrived Nigeria in a military jet. They came, of course, Fon, you know the rest of the story. They refused to enter the FECAFOOT vehicle, refused to sleep in Independence Hotel, came into the stadium with a set of shoes, football shoes, but they had a pair in their hands. And when I asked one of them, why? He said, Cameroonians are very mischievous. We don't want to carry anything from the dressing room before we get into the field. And interviews with Keshi, well, they abound. and what happened to Ngodiga on that day when he left the stadium, in that very frightening situation. And so it was. I'm so grateful that we had this conversation together.
No, thank you very much. And again, yeah, this is just a teaser because next Sunday, the finals of the National Veterans Tournament here in Maryland, Mr. Njomo Kevin will be running some commentaries, from what I understand, and I'll be there to. Yes, I'll be there to also have him live so that we can get this. So I don't know, Fon, maybe we would arrange to see how to make the program next Saturday and Sunday. We'll fix that out so that we can bring to the audience something. And for me, it's great because standing on the shoulders of two giants means that I am also going to become a giant someday. I really want to appreciate you all. And I know we didn't get into much of what we wanted to do today, Fon. We talked a lot about FECAFOOT and the World Cup next Saturday again. But I want to give you the opportunity, Mr. Kevin. You want to say some last words? And by the way, you want to go to his site. You want to go to his YouTube page, and just bear with me a second.
I am Njomo Kevin, a veteran Cameroonian journalist, widely known for sports and entertainment. My professional career started in Nigeria, and that was with the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation at the time in Calabar, and it later became the Crossover Radio. I ran a big-time sports program on Crossover Radio known as Sports Roundup. I covered matches at local and national level, especially matches for the Elite One Division competition, football competition in Nigeria at the time. After serving the Crossover Radio for about 3 years, I came over to Cameroon in 1979, where I was directly employed with an arm of Radio Cameroon, which was Radio Boya. In Radio Boya, I did a lot of sports coverage.
So again, please go on to Njomo Kevin TV. It's on YouTube. The best thing you can do for Uncle Njomo Kevin at this time is to sign up, subscribe on his YouTube channel. It's a lot. There's a lot there, a lot of history you love. And that's somebody asked a question here. Albert, your dear friend, ask our friends how far back can we have videos of matches from CRTV, especially before 1985?
Well, just go in touch with CRTV and then ask them the question. We are no longer at CRTV, so we can't answer on their behalf.
Yeah, and somebody says great program, Lambert. Kudos. So thank you all. And again, this is a regular feature. We have not missed any Saturdays since we started, and that was I think June, if I'm not mistaken. We have been on every Saturday, and we plan to be on every Saturday till December after the World Cup. And I'm not seeing that we are going to abandon this anytime soon, especially now that we also have a big brother here. We are going to continue tapping when it's available to come on. We are always welcome to join us so that we can share from that rich treasury that you have. But I open up, Uncle Kevin, maybe you have some last words before we round up.
No, I'm very fine. I told you that it's a befitting triangle, very befitting triangle that we share something very intimately. If one wants to talk about St. Charles Luanga Dormitory, I can say something about it, and you can say something about it. And if you want to say something about the sacristy, I'll have something to say about it, and you too. So, and if we want to talk about the very relish, the fufu corn meals that we ate or relish, I ate that in the 670s. You definitely made those same meals, so we can always have one little thing, be it academic, really spiritual, or whatever socially. We have something in common we can share, and the most important thing all of us from Bishop Rogan share is love.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you on. Yes.
Lambert, Kevin, he just said it. He said, for those who are not at the beginning of this program, he said, We share something in common. We all come out of Bishop Rogan College, and there's something special about us that the three of us coming on Biroko are flocking together. So while others say that birds of the same feathers flock together, Bishop Rogan students say that birds of the same plumage conglomerate.
Right. So thank you all. It's been a great Saturday to spend together. And again, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. But today we want to encourage you go to Uncle Njomo's channel. Just type in Njomo Kevin's TV, and you get to his YouTube channel. And I just want to encourage you. You will not. If you go there, make sure you don't have any work to do, because you may end up abandoning your job.
Yeah.
On Thursday, we watched an interview that he gave explaining why PW Bamenda missed or lost at the finals. I think it's 1979. Am I right?
1979.
Yes.
Against Dynamo.
Yes, and it's very interesting to listen to why PW Bamenda lost that game. I encourage you go to that page and listen to it. So thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Enjoy, and a good evening for those of you in Yaoundé. Thank you, and next Saturday, see you.
Good.